Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are podcasts. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. Send us your questions and comments by email to dj@ArtistFirst.com. Now here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. And that was an insane introduction. Actually, it was really awesome. But tonight's topic,
yes,
is something of which I'm very familiar with.
I think we all are, frankly.
Yeah, but I'm really good at it. It's insanity. But a particular aspect of it, insanity, from the point of view of, I guess, Eckhart Tolle, is becoming who you think you are.
Right. Exactly. And all the repercussions of being who you think you are.
Right. We're going to have to, of course, unpack that. We will do that over the course of the next hour or so. But, even on its surface, even without any going into the depths at all, living in a delusion, in a fantasy land, is living in in a created, let's say, a thought universe. When you see somebody and they're just their screed or whatever it is, their thing that they have to tell you all about, and they go on and on and on about, and they're this is what they do and what and right in the back of your head you're going, this person is deluded. They have no idea. Right? They have no idea how the world works. And you say to yourself, they're just living in a fantasy world, in a world of their own making.
It seems to be happening a lot lately.
It does, but I mean, this is the kind of the when you start to appreciate the fact that there are people who deal with reality as it is. And I'm not talking even what Tolle is talking about, but just really practical people who kind of, okay, well then we'll make this plan, we'll do that. They're not looking for enlightenment. They're just kind of in essence staying grounded or staying focused, and then you have people whose whole life is sort of this endless series of delusions, about who they are, who everyone else is, whether they're out to get me or they're, I'm this and they're that, I'm in this group, they're in that group, this is what I believe, that's what they believe, it's us and them, and you always walk away from that feeling like this person is living in this sort of mental maelstrom. And Tolle sits back and he abstracts that, and he basically says that thoughts, the mind itself is a powerful and wonderful tool, but thoughts, which at their basic, at their sort of root of they blossom into the mind. And if you looked at them on a PET scan or on a scanner that can look at the way thoughts are moving, they're literally energy. They're literally chemical electrical impulses that are firing in synchrony through these. If you just look at it from a pure physical standpoint, there's a constant, basically shifting flow of energy in your mind. Well, that energy, when it's looked at in broad, like with an electroencephalogram or something, it's all this jumble of what looks like squiggly lines. And if you look at it on a PET scan, you can see these blobs of color and everything. And that all represents, in essence, the physical nature of what thoughts are. They are energetic things. They are not, a thought is not a mechanistic process. No part of your brain like moves and whacks into another part of the brain. The brain sits there as a static entity, and electrochemical impulses fly through it. So Tolle says your thoughts are energy. This is a basic fact. But they also, in essence, become entities. And that's an interesting sort of abstraction of a thought. A thought acquires, I hesitate to say persona, but it acquires a certain cohesiveness. It moves through the brain not in a random way. It is not, well, some people maybe, but it's not a pachinko machine.
Don't.
I'm just kidding, but you're not throwing a bunch of marbles in the top which are plinking their way down. The thought moves.
The idea that somebody's thoughts is just a giant plinko game.
Well, that's what I was trying to say. A giant pachinko machine. And you stopped me, but that's what I meant. Not really, but the thoughts are not just a bunch of marbles that roll down the hill, hitting into all the things on the way down. No, there's an organization to them. And there are neuroscientists and neurochemical scientists who show that not only do thoughts kind of wear a pathway or a channel, physical channel in the brain, but there are physical changes in the structure of the brain caused by thoughts. So the energy moving through the structure has a certain cohesiveness. Okay. So Tolle abstracts that, and he says that thoughts, are entities, and the problem with a thought is as it passes through the mind, it's fine. That's its normal function. Thoughts come in. There's a you have a consideration. You have a word. You have something, and it comes through. If it flows through the mind like energy through a river's bed, it's fine. The river's bed is meant to carry this energy, and the energy flows through it. It pulses as almost as currents through a wire. But these entities have the ability to deform the wire, to put a hole or a pocket, or become a sort of like a whirling eddy in the river. And what that whirling eddy is it's sort of an energetic whirlpool. It's an energetic sinkhole in your mind. It is. So. People who are pachinko machines, and people who are energetic sinkholes. So the energetic sinkhole, a whirling maelstrom like that, is what people who are deluded. You see that their whole mind, their whole persona, is wrapped around like a black hole wraps space around it. This whirling eddy of energy acquires a persona, an entity-ness, and it starts to, in essence, deform the thought process and deform itself, deform everything around it, so that it all, like a black hole does, all whirls inward. That every new piece of energy just adds to the spin. It adds to the, they're out to get me, and I know this one is that one, and it just builds and builds and builds until the thing that happens is that people no longer can think. What they have to do is they have to, in essence, think around, or think, the thoughts are all warped by this entity, and they become bound up by it.
Well, the energetic patterning that happens when you have a specific thought, that pattern is repeated over and over and over again. So in that way, it begins to change the mind pattern, or rather the brain pattern that occurs when you have that specific thought. And it's very interesting observing the PET scan, because you can see the wave function through the electrical movement from neuron to neuron in a specific manner. So, which is probably the foundation of the habit that forms in a human being. I mean, we were meant or built that way to be able to have repetitive thoughts. But we are also capable of changing thought. But let's go back to the habitual pattern. So having that thought and it appears in this specific pattern again and again and again, the brain itself begins to form stronger pathways to be able to sustain that thought. And when it does that, you are reinforcing that particular thought physically in the brain. Now, and the thought, frankly, can be positive or negative. This is pretty much you're tweaking your physical tool that your consciousness uses, or the tweaking of the mind, if you would. So the repetitive pattern, you have to become aware of what kind of thought is taking seed and or it's almost like a seed being planted in your head, and then it grows into this larger network, almost like the way a plant grows.
Or a weed, if it's
a weed, yeah.
Well, and like a weed, it's difficult to get rid of.
Right.
And where Tolle goes further, he goes further into the, I think you were talking about Carolyn Meese. Was that, she's the neurologist? Who's the neurologist?
No.
I always get her name wrong. It doesn't matter. It'll come to you. It won't come to me. But Tolle was talking about the fact that, in essence, these thoughts, and our quote talks about this a little bit. We didn't read the quote, but we will in a minute. These thoughts, in essence, acquire they attempt to both make you identify with them and then take over. And in essence, your being gets crowded out. And the thought says, I am the being. You are your thoughts. And this becomes, and this is where we started, this becomes insanity. Becoming, and it seems weird, but becoming who you think you are. And there's interesting that that's who you think you are, because there are two yous in that sentence, but there are two different uses of that word. Becoming who you think you are is allowing the mind to take over the consciousness, or to, in essence, narrow, limit, contain, put into this energetic whirlpool, and never look outside of it. Look only for definition of self in thoughts. I'm this, I'm that. They're doing this, I'm doing that. They're out to get me. I'm going to do this. This endless thought stream.
Well, the foundation of it is the drive to know who you are.
Yes.
Okay, that I am being. But the drive is to begin to explore that. What does that mean? Is usually the first question. And in that essence, it puts it into the field of the mind. And when you put it into the field of the mind, then thoughts start, okay, well, I'm this or I'm that, which is not what a being state is. But the mind feels that this is the only way to know who I am. And that is the drive for every human being on this earth, is to know who you are. But the interesting part about that is, when you really get into it, you have to acknowledge the fact that you are not a thought. To understand what thought actually is. What is thought? Because it all gets sort of piled in together in this general, like, well, isn't it all like that? Isn't thought the same as what I'm feeling right now? You know, that's when you have children, you have to begin to show them that your emotion and your thought are two different things. That's the very beginning.
Right, and we totally didn't speak about that when you were the video that we were looking at. But the emotions too can become entities, and he talks about the pain body, and that's sort of the emotional equivalent of the thought body or the thought entity. But to move it to what you just said, which is exactly correct, is there's a search for or a desire for identity, to know who you are. There's in that phrase, to know who you are, there's a trap. Let's call it a trap, because knowing is in the purview of the mind. And so when people sort of say, I want to know who I am, they're already following the wrong, or let's say the mind's guidance towards who they think they are. In other words, that phrase is sort of already fraught with peril. To know who you are is to abstract it into a thought, and then you can thoughts, like as they very easily can be transcribed into words on a paper or actions or some. But they all have to do with a limitation of being into something which thought can hold. We talk a lot in earlier shows about how people tear things up and put them into boxes. They tear up their personality, and trauma can do that too. In essence, put a blockage into an energetic, like a whirlpool, that becomes a psychosis or a neurosis or a trauma that is sucking energy away. Sometimes it can be thoughts about the past become a trauma. They become an energetic whirlpool, which sucks you in. And to know who you are is already sort of sucking you in. It's sucking you into the, if I think about it hard enough, or if I read enough books.
Well, it's interesting because it has to do with your interpretation of the words that you're using. Yes. Knowing, what is knowing? What is you? What is R?
What is R? Wait a minute.
So all that this is a good beginning point, but people like to say, well, I know everything now, so I don't have anything else to learn.
Yeah.
Okay, that just, this works for me, this is all I want to know. And then they get mired in situations because their perception of what is actually unfolding in front of them is interpreted by the baseline preconditioned consciousness that you're born into. And you, on discovering who you actually are, you begin to realize how limited all that is. It's a good start point. You got to start somewhere.
Right, and the idea of I think that the expression of that phrase, I want to know who I am, is really a codification into a phrase or a thought of a desire, of a basic human drive to realize the being,
Mm-hmm.
to bring the being into realization, or bring the consciousness into realization.
The yearning, it's a basic yearning that every single human being is born with. There's nothing wrong with it.
Nope.
There's no pejorative here. It's just acknowledging that it is foundational to your being. Foundational.
And as such, it has essential energy in and of itself. There's an essential drive there. But the mind is, again, as a beautiful, useful tool, unfortunately, has a bit of an ego and wants to hijack that and say, I will know, I will let you know who you are. Don't and now we have I will let you know who you are. So we have three identities in this one sentence. But the mind does that. The mind pipes up and says, in essence, you want to know who you are? I'll tell you who you are.
Let me tell you who you are.
Let me tell you who you are. And then the mind will throw up thought after thought after thought after endless thought about who you are. It's a well-meaning idiot. It really is. The mind really, really, really wants to help you find out who you are. But like a helpful idiot, it gets in its own way. It gets in the way of the actual question it's trying to answer, because it's unfortunately something the mind cannot answer, because the being encompasses the mind. It's like having a fish trying to define water. And the fish is like, I'll tell you what water is. Water is, and it goes on and on and on, without being able to actually understand that water is all around it, that it's everywhere, that in essence everything that it's doing is within the water. And it can't even understand that the water has a boundary, or that the water itself has, in essence is a volume, is a space. It can't figure that out because it's all operating from within its own construct. The mind is within consciousness, but can't figure it out and wants to figure it out, and desperately wants to tell you. And this is only the mind can do this. It desperately wants to tell you who you are, and the mind's like, okay, there's me, there's you, and there's this other guy. And we're all going to figure it out together.
Well, but that it basically allows you to understand that the mind can only learn through being relative to something, which is interesting because the being state it doesn't need an explanation, but the mind needs to have an orientation or an origin point from which to begin to build a structure to understand what it is that's going on. It's fascinating, really.
And you can see an analogy of it in the way that human beings, as a species, we study our environment, or we study our universe, and from within the universe, we're trying to figure out what it is. This is the mind within the consciousness. The mind is the earth, or a human being on the earth, in infinitesimal dust mode, trying to figure out the universe, and doing a pretty darn good job, really running fast and thinking really, really hard. But as the wonderful little scientists in Oxford say, we've written down all these equations. Here they are. Here's everything we know. And as far as we can tell, this is about 5% of the actual universe. And this is everything we know. Everything we can see and touch, about 5%. We're not quite sure. And so at the end of the day, the mind has some clues. But the biggest clue, and this is what Tolle's revelation was, the biggest clue is that the mind has to realize that in between the thoughts is where the consciousness resides.
Right. It is, there is a way to begin to expand, to understand that the structure you built is contained within something. And what is that something that it's contained in?
You know what we've done all half hour?
Mm-hmm.
We have not read Tolle's quote. So why don't we read Tolle's quote, and then we'll bang out to the studio after that, and we'll come back and talk more about insanity. But let's read Tolle's quote first.
All right. The stream of thinking has enormous momentum that can easily drag you along with it. Every thought pretends that it matters so much. And when you acknowledge that, okay, and that's the end of Tolle's quote, but acknowledging the fact that every thought that comes through like a wave has tremendous momentum. It's going to go through. And you have the ability to either ride that wave or not.
Dragged along with it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like about his, besides what you just said, which is wonderful, I like the word pretends. Because pretend is the make-believe word. I'm pretending to do this, I'm pretending to do that. Thoughts are pretenders. They are making believe that they are you, or that they are the consciousness. They're pretending that they are able to define you, that they are you, and they're pretending so hard that they can, if you are not careful, easily drag you in. It's again this, thoughts have enormous momentum, but if they get stuck, Tolle talks about this, they get stuck, the momentum turns into a whirlpool rather than a stream.
Right.
Oh yes, and let's, on that note, we're going to take our whirlpool, we're going to go back to the studio, we're going to destroy a few things, and then we'll come back and talk more about insanity.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
Moonstones and murder. Real murderers need a heart of stone. Meet Maggie and Mike Heartstone, parents of twin boys, entrepreneurs, and now empty nesters. Mike is retired, not by choice, from his position as chief of police in the picturesque resort town of Hamilton. And now his wife Maggie and her shop, the Cozy Crystal, are their only source of income. When a mysterious killing interrupts Hamilton's famous Springfield Park rock show, the townsfolk, the Cozy Crystal, and their lives are rocked to the core. Can Mike and Maggie figure out who is behind the murderous deeds before the town comes crashing down around them? A touch of romance, a little mayhem, and a whole lot of suspense, along with plenty of comedy and thrills galore. Get your crystal magnifying glass out. It's time for some moonstones and murder. Available on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and other fine e-tailers in ebook and paperback. Out soon on Audible. Get your copy today.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
Hello, this is Highway 59 recording artist Randy Moore, and you are listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lynes is book 1 of the adventures of Devkalion, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
Hi, this is Amanda Gray. Check out my new book, Glimpses of Grace in Georgia, available on Westbow Press Bookstore, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon. More information can be found at my website, www.glimpsesofgraceingeorgia.com, and you are listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
Thanks for joining us on The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lynes.
Thank you very much, Zeman. And I'm insane.
And I'm married to insane. Okay.
On me it looks. Anyway, tonight we are talking about insanity from the point of view of from the point of view of thoughts. And thoughts, if you talk about, the modern day sort of, and this is modern day, I mean, but in the 20th and 21st century, most of what has been defined as insanity is encapsulated in, let's call them toxic thoughts. An obsession is just a repetitive thought. A neurosis is a delusional thought. There's every piece of insanity, if you will, can be traced back to a sort of a deformed thought entity. And if you look at the broad spectrum of people, you have about 0.1% who are sane, and everyone else is crazy. In one degree or another.
Degrees of crazy.
It's just a spectrum of crazy. And where do you fall on the spectrum? Some people are always on the far left in the red thing in the corner, in the straitjacket. And some people and most people are somewhere in the middle, and kind of moving around. The needle moves back and forth a little bit, like today I'm really nuts, today I'm not so bad. And a lot of it has to do with the current, and I'm going to say crowd of thought entities which happen to be occupying their psyche at that moment. There are people whose lives are built around this sort of endless lists and endlessly making, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do that, or the bucket list, or I'm planning for this future and that future and this contingency and that contingency and this trip. So it's all about, and this is if it goes to a toxic level, it becomes an obsessive compulsive disorder. But all this is just thought energy continually roiling the mind, continually roiling the being, the consciousness, and taking over.
Right.
becoming this,
Right.
it's a parasite in many ways, Mark.
Well, it's basically what you're saying is that by living through thought and only living through thought, you walk straight into mental illness, because the life force that it takes to have the thought does not belong to thought. Isn't that an interesting thought?
Thought. She thought. Well, no, expound upon that. That's a part of Tolle's thing. But yeah, go into that a bit.
Well, you're only focused on what you are thinking in this moment. And the check is always, well, what do I think about that? Well, what do I think about that? Occasionally it's, well, how do I feel about that?
Right.
So your feel part and your think part are trading insanity back and forth because
Right.
they begin to have slap fights with each other.
Well, I think I know how I feel. Ah.
And it's a very interesting dynamic that goes on in that particular way. So to understand that, in order to come to a point of peace, because if you look at it from that perspective, they're like two small children, one's thought and one's emotions, and there is no discipline in either of them. So you get these crazy arguments going on to the point where they become violent to one another. And it's an energetic violence, mind you. And this is all going on in your head. So you wonder, you sit there and you wonder, like, why certain people are feeling a certain way. They're exuding this very strange, confused jumble. There's no peace in their being. It's just this back and forth. You have to realize that their thoughts and their emotions are having kid fights with each other, calling each other names,
Yes.
touching each other.
Yes. Or literally, the emotion. A thought evokes an emotion. Emotion evokes a thought, and they build one upon the other, and people can become ragingly out of control, but in their mind. And so what you feel on the outside is this confused energy. If you look into their eyes, you can see that they're not present at all. They're completely, totally, internally distracted and unfocused. And then when they speak, it doesn't have any relevance to what's actually happening now. It's off in some other corner, and you have to kind of go, where did that thought? You go, what the heck?
Can we redirect you?
Right. But you can't, because they are totally stuck. When you get to this, you're stuck. You're wedded and welded to these thoughts, and when you start to try to express yourself, what comes out to those around you who aren't sharing this maelstrom, who don't understand the current struggle at all because they're not inside you, it sounds odd and strange. And you go, well, why are they acting that way? Well, you can't figure it out. And that confuses people, and it makes people a little angry themselves. And these thoughts can be contagious. If somebody comes in all mad and bent out of shape and starts yelling and screaming, all of a sudden you'll have a whole bunch of people who are mad, bent out of shape, and they're either mad at you or mad about something else. And this triggering, these deformed or malformed maelstroms of thought, these kind of entities, will fight with each other, as you said, within your own mind, and you know it. You know when you're in this thought emotion maelstrom inside your mind. Oh, this thing happened 17 years ago. Aunt Betty did this, and brrr, it's going like mad. And then all of a sudden you come out and say, I hate people in pink shorts, because who knows why. And people go, I have pink shorts. I hate you. And so, how war starts. But the warped, deformed entities within the head don't care. They're getting what they want, which is that you are identifying and totally wrapped up in the mind's thoughts. The mind loves that, wants that.
Well, this is how it feeds. This is how it feeds. You give it the attention, and that's plugging into energy for them. And this is how it feeds. You begin to reinforce whatever the thought pattern happened to be. And as you feed the thought pattern, it grows and grows, and it becomes so strong that it overpowers the consciousness.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I had written down is, why do thoughts pretend that they matter so much? Why? And this is exactly why. In order for the thought to exist, it needs your attention. And you think about it, that is a very parasitic and vampiric thing.
Yeah.
And all the converse is true too. In order for an emotion to exist, it must have your attention. So it's a big clue on realizing how important what you put your attention to actually is. Because what you give attention to gives life to that. You know, it's like small children. You give life to small children by paying attention to them. And most people's traumas happen, you know, the memories that they're always fighting are the ones when they were small children, whether or not they got the attention.
And I love that, because what you're really saying is that the attention, which is consciousness, it's awareness. Thoughts wish to, like small children, act out. Get your attention, get your awareness, get the energy of consciousness, which is what they are, in essence, let's say, floating in. What they are within is within a consciousness. The consciousness has a vast amount of power.
Yes.
A really limitless amount of power.
Yes.
And it has the ability to be aware. And thought hijacks that and tries to just ball it all up and limit the awareness. It really can't do it completely 100% successfully. And what happens is thought and emotion, because they're fighting like small slap fight children for your attention, create suffering. They create suffering in you, and they create suffering in others. And the consciousness is not something, I'll say this in a weird way, which suffers suffering. It will tire of the suffering. Consciousness will, as a parent tires of the bickering between children, consciousness will just finally say, if you give it enough suffering, enough. You shut up. You behave. And the peace, the little gap of peace in between the thought which has been stilled, or the emotion which has been muffled, that thought, that peace, the awareness starts to pay attention to that.
Well, the thought, and especially the emotion, must be let go of. Okay, it's not muffled. It's they've got to pass through. When you cling to it, that's when you're trapping emotions and thought within your own energetic body. They must pass through. You have to let go. And the thing is, these things do not want you to let go, because the minute you let go, they have no life. They only obtain life when you're paying attention to them. Have you ever wondered why a certain thing happens to you over and over and over again, and you're like, didn't I take care of that? Why is that coming back? And you have to go into it and look at it in terms of, what am I feeding that this has to rise up again? What is it that's being fed at this point? And consciously say, no, enough. I take my awareness away from you. It no longer can stand on its own. This is the main creative force that every human being has. The ability to create a world around them. And it is by what you pay attention to, what you accept, and what you do not. When you do not accept something, you do not give it any attention. That is the most efficient way to cut it off.
Well, and you say, as you say, that it's, and Tully says this too. The thought in and of itself is a fine thing.
Yes.
It's when you allow it to monopolize your awareness, your attention. The emotion by itself is a fine thing, and you said it before, and we said it at the beginning of the show. Thoughts coming in and performing useful work and flowing out again, not ever gathering your attention as an entity, as just a purposeful thing, a wave in the ocean, a ripple. Same with an emotion. Emotion is a purposeful thing. It's important that you feel love and you feel pain and you feel sadness. All these things, these are things which are essential to the human being. You cannot be a human being and not have emotion or have thought. Yet, if the thought or the emotion sits there and in essence says, feed me, it becomes a fat, indolent, lazy, greedy thought.
Selfish, I believe, is the word.
A selfish thought, a thought entity which says, feed me, pay attention to me and nothing else. As Tolle says, it pretends that it matters so much. And when, the Buddhists, they have their own discipline, their own meditation, is you let the thought come in, like a marble rolling on a table, it rolls across the table, drops off. This is, if you practice that, if you use that mental image, it is a mental image, because the Buddhist is quite mental, but that mental image of the thought being a marble can't stay still, it's going to roll. And let it roll. Let it go. Let it come through. Let it drop off. This allows you to see that the table and the space that the marble is rolling through are not the thought. And the whole universe that contains the table and the space is you observing the thought, observing the emotion. The emotion comes in, you go, oh, here's my friend fear again. There you are. Hi, fear. Oh, fear's going to stay for a little while, then fear's going to go away. And then we're fine again. It's just us, consciousness. Fear rises. Wow, here it is. I'm afraid. Yep, that's me being afraid, all right. And it moves through. Same thing with the thought.
I feel afraid. I am not afraid.
Right.
I feel afraid. See, this is again the mental part trying to say, this is who you are. You are fear. It's like, no, I feel afraid, but I am not fear.
Right.
It's making that distinction internally, and you can see how the language facilitates that deception. You have to be aware in that moment. To make those fine distinctions is reflected in your speech always.
You're absolutely right, because what do you first say? I feel afraid. You say, I'm afraid. I am afraid. I am fear. And if you say it just as you did, I feel afraid, that means the I is still the I. The observer is observing a feeling.
This is the way fear can control you. If you say, I'm afraid, then fear controls you. If you say, I feel afraid, you are in control and you observe the fear. You're not saying it doesn't exist. It does. But you are the one making the choice in that moment.
the wonderful little phrase that the monk said, "Is that so?" When thoughts crash into you from others, or they crash into your mind, this one is out to get me, and this is going to happen, and in the mind, in your persona, they're trying to become incredibly important. Pay attention to me. I'm important. I'm going to do the, and you just sit back and say, "Is that so? I see the thought. I see that you have come in and presented me this possibility. But is it so? Or is it just a thought? And is something I can do? Or can I just accept that there's the thought? Is there something that can be done about it? No. Fine. Go along. I'll do what needs to be done until there's something else that can be done. But none of it becomes identity. You don't say, "Oh, I am what you say I am, and therefore I have to argue against it." No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not.
But see, that is exactly how that thought or situation takes life from you, takes your life force, takes the life force of everyone else in the room, and the drama begins. Because there's enough juice for the drama to play out.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that true? Because what is a drama but, as we all know, it's a play.
Mm-hmm. So when you realize that that's happening, the best thing to do is to begin to notice the space in between. Space in between breaths, the space in between thoughts, the space in between emotions. And that's when you focus on something larger than the thought or the emotion or the drama. And it doesn't matter what people may be saying to you. It's not you. And you don't accept it. Again, like the analogy of the thoughts and emotion having a slap fight. You basically say, "No, enough. I am in charge."
And I am observing a thought. Thought has a purpose, and it goes through. I am feeling an emotion. Emotion has a purpose, and it goes through. And you then have the true you, the consciousness, the big I, if you will, not the little I, but the big I. The I which is a presence, which contains all thoughts you've ever had and all the emotions you've ever had, and your whole life up to this point, and everything around you. The whole universe is now in you, and you observe it. And what does the universe need? Again, we've talked about this in the past. It needs the observer. The universe needs to be observed in order to exist.
Well, that is your creation. That is your world. But let me just go back to that point of focusing on stillness and that dimension of space and stillness. When you are there, your mind is no longer insane.
Yes.
Okay, that's the point I want to make. That drive for you to know who you are, which begins, this is your beginning point, and you're continually seeking yourself. When you're in that point of spaciousness, you're no longer seeking yourself in your mind, because you are you in that stillness. Being.
Yes. No, I mean, beyond, that's exactly, the mind rejects that almost reflexively. Why? So that's too simple. The mind, it can't be. That's much harder than that. It's just like, nah, that's just crap. It's very hard. stuff you gotta do. You gotta climb these trees and do this stuff and these katas, and you gotta find all these plates, and there's other things to do. And the mind is just right away goes, that's from. And it's afraid in the sense that you'll realize how incredibly simple it is to become aware of the space between your thoughts. And then once you've done it, and once you start to feel that, it expands. It can expand rather rapidly. You can have truly a lightning bolt of enlightenment. And then when you understand that, we said this before, totally, you come to the end of self, the end of thought, the end of suffering. It isn't that the world changes, it's that you change, because it's your world in the now. It's your universe. It's your universe in every sense of the word, because the universe is within you, and you are the observer of the universe, and you no longer have to suffer. Will things happen to you? Yeah. Are you going to die? Absolutely. All that stuff. But the suffering is gone because you don't identify with death or with pain or with any of that stuff. Suffering comes from identity. I am pain. I am fear.
No, but that is exactly it. And to become aware of what you are paying attention to is one of the greatest tools that you can use to help expand consciousness and allow the chains or the box that you have produced by repetitive thoughts or repetitive emotions and have trapped your attention. And the funny thing about attention is that you really can't hang on to it. You can allow it to move to any point in space and time and eternity.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing.
It is amazing, and as mine says, yes, the mind says it can't be that simple. It is that simple, and I am that simple, and it is time to end this simple show. So I am Michael Linus.
And I'm Margaret, and thank you for listening.